The moment Commander Jackson Reed spat blood onto the pristine alabaster floor of the Grand Galactic Council chamber, he knew diplomacy had failed. The 7-foot-tall Rexian ambassador flexed his barbed appendages in disgust, while the other alien delegates murmured in their various incomprehensible languages. Only the universal translators hanging from the ceiling gave their words meaning. The audacity of these humans, the Rexian hissed, compound eyes reflecting the harsh light. They send us their weakest specimens and expect to be welcomed as equals. Reed wiped his mouth, the metallic taste of blood lingering on his tongue. He straightened his back, ignoring the burning pain where the Rexian's ceremonial greeting had cracked 2 of his ribs. "We came in peace," Reed said, his voice steady despite the agony. "We still come in peace." The Grand Chamber erupted in what Reed's translator identified as laughter, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and guttural sounds that made his skin crawl. "Peace?" The Hegemony Supreme, a floating gelatinous mass of neural tissues pulsed with blue bioluminescence. "Your species can barely survive in standard galactic conditions. Your muscles atrophy in our gravity. Your lungs strain for oxygen in our atmosphere. Your bodies break under our traditional greetings. What could you possibly offer the Galactic Council except as perhaps study specimens?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. Reed glanced at his team. Sarah Wilson, their xenobiologist, whose face was pale but determined, Marcus Thompson, their engineer, who nervously adjusted the portable oxygen enhancer at his belt, and Kyle Bennett, their security specialist, whose hand kept drifting toward the ceremonial blade they'd been permitted to keep. "Supreme representatives," Reed began again, "Earth may be what you call a low-challenge world, but we—" "A pathetic world," interrupted the Drakthul representative, scales shimmering as it rose to its full 12-foot height. "Our sensors indicate your planet has minimal atmospheric toxicity, negligible radiation levels, and gravity so weak it's a wonder you don't float away. Your apex predators are nothing but furry pets. You've evolved without true challenge, without the forge of survival that creates worthiness." Reed swallowed another mouthful of blood. The environmental suit beneath his formal uniform was already working overtime to compensate for the crushing 1.8 g gravity and the nitrogen-heavy atmosphere that made every breath an effort. "We request," Reed pushed through gritted teeth, "a chance to prove humanity's worth. We've traveled 17 light years to establish diplomatic relations. Surely there's some way we can demonstrate—" "Yes." The Vrexian ambassador's mandibles clicked excitedly. "A demonstration! I propose the humans participate in the Centennial Survival Summit on Death Moon Keris." A shocked silence fell over the chamber, followed by a wave of what Reed's translator identified as excited agreement. "What's Death Moon Keris?" Sarah whispered to Reed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. The Hegemony Supreme's neural mass pulsed with what might have been amusement. "Keris is where we test the mettle of new species, a small moon terraformed to contain the most challenging environments from across the galaxy. Species that survive earn respect, most don't." "And those that don't survive?" Reed asked, though he already knew the answer. "Are forgotten," the Vrexian answered, "as is appropriate for the weak." Reed looked at his team. They'd been selected as Earth's first ambassadors not for their diplomatic skills but for their adaptability, problem-solving abilities, and mental fortitude. Still, they were just 4 humans in environmental suits against a galaxy that saw them as evolutionary failures. "We accept," Reed said, before he could reconsider. The Galactic Council erupted in what could only be described as gleeful mockery. 3 days later, the sleek drop pod streaked through Keris's turbulent atmosphere, its heat shields glowing orange against the perpetual night of the tidally locked moon. Inside, Reed and his team braced for impact, strapped into seats designed for beings with very different anatomies. "Remember," Reed shouted over the roar of entry, "they're watching us. Everything we do will be broadcast across the galaxy." "Fantastic," Marcus yelled back, clutching his pack of hastily modified equipment. "Not only do we die horribly, but we do it with an audience." The pod slammed into the surface with enough force to rattle Reed's teeth. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the cramped interior in red. Outside, sensor readings painted a nightmarish picture. Atmosphere toxic with sulfur compounds, temperature hovering around 105 BPQ, gravity a punishing 1.9 g, and atmospheric pressure that would make Earth's deepest ocean trenches seem hospitable. Suit integrity holding, Sarah reported, checking her displays. But we've got maybe 72 hours of filtration before we're breathing whatever hell is out there. Kyle was already at the view portal, his enhanced tactical visor scanning the landscape. Movement detected. Multiple life forms. Nothing recognizable from Earth taxonomy. Reed activated the pod's external scanners. The moonscape that materialized on the display looked like something from a fever dream. Jagged obsidian formations, jutting from bubbling chemical pools, vegetation that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent rhythm, and skies torn by lightning that arced between metallic clouds. "They've dropped us in the worst possible location," Sarah said, studying the environmental readings. This region contained elements from at least 5 different death worlds. The air itself contains microscopic silicon-based parasites. The pod suddenly lurched, tilting precariously. Something massive had grabbed it from the outside. "We need to move," Reed commanded, grabbing his emergency pack. "Now?" The team scrambled to secure their equipment as the pod's hull began to dent inward, metal groaning under enormous pressure. Kyle slammed his palm against the emergency release, and the door blew outward with an explosive hiss. They stumbled into the hostile world, immediately staggered by the crushing gravity. Through his faceplate, Reed saw the horror that had attacked their pod, a writhing mass of tentacles anchored to the ground, each appendage ending in something resembling a metallic drill. One tentacle was already probing toward them, sensing their movement. "Run!" Reed gasped, each step requiring Herculean effort against the gravity. They fled toward a ridge of black glass-like rock, their bodies already protesting the exertion. Reed's lungs burned despite his suit's oxygen enhancement. His muscles screamed as they worked against forces humans were never designed to withstand. From somewhere in the toxic skies, Reed knew cameras were tracking their desperate flight, broadcasting humanity's struggling first steps to a galaxy that expected, perhaps even hoped for, their quick demise. They reached the ridge just as one of the creature's tentacles lashed out, missing Kyle's leg by inches. Scrambling over the sharp edge, they collapsed on the other side, breathing heavily in their suits. "This is insane," Marcus panted, his face slick with sweat inside his helmet. "There's no way we can survive this." "Did you see that thing? What the hell evolved in conditions like these?" "The strongest species in the galaxy, apparently," Sarah replied, already taking readings with a handheld device. "According to the Rexians, this moon has been used as a testing ground for over 10,000 years. Reed stared back at the creature still tearing apart their pod. In the distance, he could make out other monstrosities moving across the hellish landscape, things that slithered, flew, and burrowed. All evolved to hunt and kill in an environment designed for only the most ruthless survivors. "We need shelter," he decided, forcing his aching body to stand. "And we need to prove these bastards wrong." "How exactly do we do that?" Kyle asked, checking their meager weapons, a pulse knife, some flares, and basic survival tools deemed too primitive to be threatening. Reed pointed to a formation of overlapping rock plates about half a kilometer away. "We start by surviving the first night. Then we figure out how to turn this nightmare into our advantage." As they laboriously made their way across the treacherous terrain, Reed's mind raced. The Galactic Council had made a fundamental error in judgment. Yes, Earth was peaceful compared to the worlds these aliens evolved. Yes, humans lacked natural weapons, poisonous secretions, or reinforced exoskeletons. But what the aliens failed to understand was that humans hadn't survived by being the strongest species. They'd survived by being the most adaptable, by seeing patterns, by turning disadvantages into strengths, by working together. When they reached the rock formation, Marcus immediately began assessing its structural integrity, while Kyle secured the perimeter. Sarah analyzed soil and atmospheric samples, her scientific mind already looking for exploitable properties. "The silicon parasites in the air," she announced after several minutes of study. "They're photosynthetic. They die in darkness. And those tentacle creatures," Kyle added, "they hunt by sensing vibration. If we stay still and quiet, they might pass us by." Reed nodded, feeling the first spark of hope. Already, his team was doing what humans did best, learning, adapting, finding the patterns that might keep them alive. "The Council thinks we'll be dead by morning," Reed said, wincing, as he eased his battered body onto a relatively flat rock. Let's make sure that's the first of many miscalculations they make about humanity. In the poisonous sky above, the camera drones continued their silent observation, capturing the first hours of what the Galactic Council assumed would be humanity's brief and futile struggle against a world designed to destroy them. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Dawn on Death Moon Keras wasn't the gentle arrival of light, but rather a hellish transition from pitch darkness to a blood-red sky torn by constant electrical storms. The tiny shelter Reed's team had constructed from overlapping stone plates and emergency sealant had barely survived the night. Twice they'd been forced to relocate as predators tracked their heat signatures through the rock. Marcus slumped against the wall, his face haggard behind his helmet visor. "2 of our oxygen recyclers failed during the night," he reported hoarsely. "We're down to about 40 hours of breathable air." Reed nodded grimly. They'd been on Keras for less than 24 hours, and already their situation was deteriorating rapidly. Outside their makeshift shelter, something massive slithered past, its segmented body scraping against the rocks. The team froze, barely breathing until the creature moved on. "I've been analyzing our environment," Sarah whispered once the danger had passed. "There's a pattern to the predator movements. They hunt in cycles corresponding to the electrical storms. When the lightning intensifies, they retreat underground." "Small comfort," Kyle muttered, checking the power levels on their dwindling supplies. "We can't stay here much longer. This location is too exposed, and we're running out of everything." Reed studied the crude map they'd assembled using brief sensor sweeps. "There's a depression about 2 kilometers south. Might be a cave system. If we time our movement with the next major storm, we might make it." The journey across the exposed moonscape was excruciating. The crushing gravity turned every step into agony, their muscles straining against forces they were never evolved to withstand. Halfway to their destination, Marcus collapsed, his legs simply giving out beneath him. "I can't," he gasped, his vitals spiking dangerously on Reed's helmet display. "You have to leave me." Reed and Kyle hoisted him between them, each step sending lightning bolts of pain through Reed's already damaged ribs. "Nobody gets left behind," Reed grunted through clenched teeth. "That's not how humans operate." They reached the depression just as the storm reached its peak intensity, deadly arcs of energy lashing the ground around them. As Sarah had predicted, the local predators had retreated, giving them a brief window of opportunity. The depression indeed led to a cave entrance, a jagged woad in the moon's surface that descended into darkness. Inside, protected from the worst of the elements, they took stock of their increasingly dire situation. Their shelter was more secure, but their supplies were critically low. Marcus's collapse had damaged one of their water recyclers. 2 of their emergency rations had been contaminated by microfilament parasites that had somehow breached their containment. "The good news," Sarah announced after running a series of tests on the cave environment, "is that there's a water source deeper in the system. It's heavily mineralized, but can be filtered for emergency hydration." "And the bad news?" Reed asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "The cave system is inhabited." As if on cue, a chittering sound echoed from the darkness, followed by the skittering of countless legs on stone. Kyle's tactical visor revealed heat signatures moving toward them. Dozens of creatures, each roughly the size of a large dog, with articulated limbs and what appeared to be natural biological weaponry. "We need a defensible position," Reed ordered, forcing his exhausted body into motion. "Kyle, set up barriers with whatever we have left. Sarah, see if you can determine whether these things have any vulnerabilities. Marcus, if you can stand, I need you to help me rig the emergency flares for maximum light coverage." They worked frantically, their bodies protesting every movement. By the time the first wave of creatures emerged from the darkness, nightmare amalgamations of arachnid and crustacean features, they had established a crude perimeter of light and improvised barriers. The creatures hesitated at the edge of the light, their eyeless heads swiveling as they assessed the unfamiliar prey. Kyle stood ready with the pulse knife, their only real weapon. Reed held a makeshift spear fashioned from equipment parts. "They're sensitive to light," Sarah whispered, observing their behavior. "But they're coordinated. Pack hunters. They're communicating." The standoff lasted nearly an hour, with the creatures testing their defenses but retreating from the harsh light of the flares. Eventually, they withdrew deeper into the cave, though Reed had no illusions that they had given up. "We've bought some time," he said, allowing himself to slide down against the cave wall, his muscles trembling with fatigue. But this is just the beginning. In the observation chamber orbiting Keres, the Galactic Council representatives watched the humans with growing unease. The Rexian ambassador chittered nervously to his aides. "They should have died during the night cycle," he hissed. "The atmospheric parasites alone should have breached their primitive protection systems." The Hegemony Supreme's neural mass pulsed with agitation. "Their adaptability is unexpected. They lack natural advantages, yet they compensate through cooperation and improvisation." Most curious, the Drakthul representative's scales flared in anger. "They make a mockery of our challenge. I propose we activate the cleansing protocol." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. The cleansing protocol had not been used in 17 cycles. It was considered excessive even by the brutal standards of the Survival Summit. "They are merely prolonging their inevitable failure," the Hegemony Supreme countered. "There is no need for interference." "I disagree," the Drakthul insisted. "Their broadcast signals are being received across the galaxy. Lesser species are watching these humans survive conditions that have broken superior life forms. It sets a dangerous precedent." After heated debate, the motion passed. The cleansing protocol was activated. On the control panel before them, a series of red indicators illuminated. On Keres, the true test of humanity was about to begin. Reed jolted awake to the cave shaking violently around them. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling as a deafening roar penetrated even through his helmet. "Earthquake!" Kyle shouted, already on his feet and pulling Sarah away from a collapsing section of wall. "No," Sarah replied, checking her readings. "This is artificial. The entire region is being geologically destabilized." Marcus had managed to get to his equipment and was scanning their surroundings. "It's not just here. I'm picking up massive environmental shifts across the moon. Temperature spikes, atmospheric changes. Even the gravitational field is fluctuating." Reed felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "They're changing the rules. They're afraid we might actually survive this." The cave system was becoming increasingly unstable. They had no choice but to evacuate, but the surface would be even more dangerous now. As they gathered their dwindling supplies, Reed made a critical decision. "We need to split up," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Kyle, you and Sarah head for the highlands to the east. There's a ridge formation that might provide shelter from whatever they're doing. Marcus and I will head west toward that metallic deposit we detected. We'll try to establish communication and regroup when things stabilize." Sarah's eyes widened behind her visor. "Splitting up reduces our collective chances of survival. Our strength has been in working together. It also doubles our chances that at least some of us make it," Reed countered. "We can't put all of humanity's eggs in one brutally crushed basket." The decision made, they divided their remaining supplies. The moment of parting was solemn, each of them aware it might be the last time they saw each other alive. 48 hours, Reed said. "We meet at the northern ridge if we can. If not," he trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Kyle nodded grimly. "We show these alien bastards what humans are made of." They emerged from the cave into chaos. The blood-red sky had darkened to an apocalyptic crimson. The ground buckled and shifted beneath their feet. In the distance, a massive fissure had opened, spewing superheated gas into the atmosphere. The crushing gravity had somehow intensified, now approaching 2. Reed and Marcus struggled westward, each step a battle against their own bodies and the hostile environment. Their progress was painfully slow, and their oxygen reserves continued to dwindle. "They really don't want us to succeed," Marcus gasped as they paused behind a rocky outcropping. His suit was showing multiple integrity warnings, and his vital signs were flashing red on Reed's heads-up display. "Which is exactly why we have to," Reed replied, helping his friend back to his feet. "Come on, we can't stop now." They had covered less than a kilometer when disaster struck. A violent tremor opened a crevice directly beneath them. Marcus fell, his weakened legs unable to propel him to safety. Reed lunged, catching his hand at the last possible moment. For several agonizing seconds, Reed held Marcus suspended above the glowing chasm below, his muscles screaming in protest against the punishing gravity. Their eyes met through their visors. "Let go," Marcus said quietly, his voice resigned. "You can't pull me up in this gravity. Not with your injuries." "The hell I can't," Reed growled, trying to dig his feet into the unstable ground for leverage. But he knew Marcus was right. His broken ribs sent waves of white-hot pain through his body with every movement. The edge of the crevice was beginning to crumble beneath him. "Listen to me," Marcus continued, his voice now urgent. "My suit's failing anyway, but I can still be useful." He reached up with his free hand and detached his oxygen reserve. "Take this. It'll give you another 18 hours. Marcus. "No. Someone has to survive to tell Earth what we've learned," Marcus insisted. "About the Council, about what's out here waiting for us." "Take it, Commander. That's an order." With his remaining strength, he thrust the oxygen unit up toward Reed, then deliberately released his grip. Reed screamed his name as Marcus plummeted into the chasm, disappearing into the superheated glow below. For several moments, Reed lay at the edge of the precipice, his body racked with pain and grief. Then, mechanically, he attached Marcus's oxygen reserve to his own system. The deed was done, the sacrifice made. Now he had to make it count. When Reed finally reached the metallic deposit they detected, he discovered it wasn't a natural formation at all. Half buried in the moon's surface was what appeared to be a crashed ship, ancient beyond reckoning, its hull composed of materials unlike anything in human technological understanding. Reed forced his way inside through a breach in the hull, finding a sanctuary from the increasingly apocalyptic conditions outside. The ship's interior was eerily preserved, as if time itself had been suspended within. "Marcus," Reed whispered to the empty air, "you should be seeing this." He explored the vessel, finding what appeared to be a control center. Though the technology was utterly alien, Reed's desperate mind began to see patterns, connections, possibilities. Earth scientists had theorized that certain technological principles might be universal: the physics of energy manipulation, the mathematics of propulsion, the logic of control systems. With trembling hands, Reed began to experiment, hoping against hope that human ingenuity might yet find a way to survive. Hours passed as he worked, his oxygen supply continuing to diminish despite Marcus's sacrifice. He was close to something, a way to reactivate the ship's ancient systems, perhaps even a means of communication, when his heads-up display flashed a critical warning: atmospheric breach detected. Suit integrity failing. Reed felt it then, the burning sensation in his lungs, as Keros's toxic atmosphere began to seep through microscopic ruptures in his suit. His vision blurred. His hands grew clumsy. "Not yet," he gasped, fighting to complete the sequence he'd begun. "Not when we're so close." Outside the ancient vessel, Keros was tearing itself apart. The cleansing protocol had entered its final phase, rendering the moon's surface completely uninhabitable, even by the standards of the Galactic Council's hardiest species. Storms of metallic particles scoured the landscape. Gravity wells collapsed and reformed randomly. The atmosphere itself had become a swirling vortex of caustic compounds. In the observation chamber, the alien delegates watched with grim satisfaction. The human called Kyle Bennett had succumbed hours ago, his suit finally giving out as he tried to protect the female, Sarah Wilson. She had lasted longer, finding refuge in a cave system on the eastern ridge, but her life signs had flatlined 20 minutes later when a gravity surge caused a catastrophic cave-in. Now only Reed remained, trapped in an ancient derelict as the moon destroyed itself around him. His vital signs were failing. His oxygen was nearly depleted. The toxic atmosphere was filling his lungs with every desperate breath. "It is finished," the Vrexian ambassador declared. "Let the record show that humanity faced the challenge and failed, as was inevitable." The Hegemony Supreme's neural mass pulsed in agreement. A commendable effort for such a primitive species, but ultimately futile. The natural order is preserved. On the main viewing screen, Reed collapsed across the alien control panel, his body finally surrendering to the accumulated trauma, oxygen deprivation, and toxic exposure. His hand fell limply on a sequence of symbols he'd been trying to activate. The screen went black. Then something unexpected happened. The ancient ship, dormant for millennia, began to hum with power. In the observation chamber, alarms suddenly blared. The Dracthal representative rushed to the monitoring station, scales flaring in disbelief. "Impossible," he hissed. The human has activated the precursor vessel." Across the remains of Death Moon Keros, a beacon began to pulse, sending a signal that had not been heard in the galaxy for thousands of years. a signal that would change everything. The ancient ship's systems surged with power, bathing Commander Reed's collapsed form in a soft blue light. His consciousness hovered at the edge of oblivion, lungs burning with Keris's toxic atmosphere. In what he assumed were his final moments, Reed's mind filled with regret for Marcus, for Sarah, for Kyle, for humanity's failed first contact. Then something extraordinary happened. The ship's emergency protocols activated. A field of energy enveloped Reed, and nanoscopic machines, dormant for millennia, began repairing his damaged tissues. Oxygen flooded his suit as the ship's environmental systems came online. Reed gasped, drawing in a clean breath for the first time in hours. He wasn't dying anymore. In the observation chamber, pandemonium erupted as the alien delegates watched the impossible unfold. "The human's life signs are stabilizing," reported a technician, mandibles clicking in agitation. "And a precursor vessel, it's responding to him." "Shut it down," the Drakthul representative demanded. "Terminate the transmission immediately." "We cannot," the technician replied, voice quavering. "Our systems no longer have access to Keras. The precursor technology has established a barrier we cannot penetrate." The Hegemony Supreme's neural mass pulsed with rarely seen patterns of alarm. "What is the signal transmitting?" "Decode it immediately." On Kera, Reed slowly regained consciousness, his mind clearing as the ship's restorative field continued its work. He found himself suspended in a cocoon of light, pain receding from his body. Around him, the ship's control center hummed with activity, displays illuminating with symbols that somehow, impossibly, he could now understand. "Welcome, Inheritor," a voice spoke directly into his mind. "Your genetic pattern has been recognized. Restoration protocols initiated." "Oh, what are you?" Reed managed to ask. "This vessel is a seed ship of the precursors. I am its operating consciousness." "You have activated the Renaissance Protocol." Reed's mind raced, trying to process this development. The precursors, he'd heard whispers of them in the council chamber. An ancient species spoken of with reverent fear, believed extinct for tens of thousands of years. "The others," Reed said urgently. "My team, can you find them?" The ship's consciousness paused. Scanning. 3 human biological signatures detected on Keras. 2 with no life functions, 1 with minimal cellular activity. Approximately 7.4 kilometers east of this position. "Sarah," Reed breathed. "She's still alive?" "Early. Cellular degradation accelerating. Estimated time until irreversible death. 13 minutes. Can you save her like you saved me?" "Affirmative." "But this vessel cannot currently relocate. Its propulsion systems remain inoperative after the crash." Reed's eyes fell on a display showing what appeared to be mechanical constructs housed within the ship. "Those," he pointed. "What are they?" "Maintenance drones. They repair and extend the vessel's systems." "Can they reach Sarah?" "Affirmative. But they would require direction." The control interface was designed for precursor neural patterns. Reed pulled himself upright, wincing as his newly healing body protested. "Show me how to control them, now." In the observation chamber, the alien delegates watched in growing horror as mechanical constructs emerged from the precursor vessel, skittering across Keris's devastated surface with impossible speed. The constructs converged on the eastern ridge, where Sarah Wilson's body lay half-buried in rubble, her suit breached in multiple places, her life signs barely registering. "What is happening?" the Vexian ambassador demanded. "This isn't possible. The human was near death." "The precursor vessel is fully operational," the technician reported. "It's deploying autonomous systems and establishing connections with other dormant precursor technology across Keras." "Other technology?" the Hegemony Supreme pulsed. "Explain immediately." "Keras was a precursor outpost," the technician admitted, shrinking back from the fury of the assembled delegates. "That's why it was chosen as the Death World Summit location. The Council discovered the ruins millennia ago, but all attempts to access precursor technology failed. It was deemed permanently inactive. Until now, the Drakthul representative hissed. "Until a human activated it." Sarah Wilson drifted in darkness, vaguely aware that she was dying. The cave-in had crushed her left leg and punctured her suit in a dozen places. The toxic atmosphere had done the rest. She thought of Earth, of stars she would never see, of scientific discoveries forever beyond her reach. Then light surrounded her, as mechanical constructs tore through the rubble. They moved with precision, carefully extracting her broken body and enveloping her in a translucent field similar to the one that had saved Reed. Sarah felt warmth spreading through her frozen limbs, breath returning to her burning lungs. "Sarah," Reed's voice came through clearly, though she couldn't see him. "Can you hear me?" "Reed?" she gasped. "How?" "No time to explain. The drones are bringing you back to the ship. You're going to be okay." As the constructs carried her rapidly across the devastated landscape, Sarah's scientific mind began to process what she was seeing. The drones weren't just transporting her, they were transforming Keras as they moved. Wherever they passed, they left behind small devices that pulsed with the same blue energy that was healing her body. "Reed," she said, stronger now as the field repaired her injuries. "What are these things doing to the environment?" "They're reactivating a network," Reed replied. "This moon, it's artificial, Sarah, created by an ancient species called the Precursors. The whole Death World Summit was taking place on their technology, and nobody knew it still worked." When Sarah reached the ship, she found Reed at what appeared to be a neural interface, his hands manipulating holographic symbols with increasing confidence. Around them, the ship had transformed from a derelict wreck to a hive of activity. "We need to find Kyle and Marcus," Sarah said immediately. Reed's expression darkened. "Marcus didn't make it. He fell into a fissure. But the ship says Kyle's body is recoverable." "His body? Then he's clinically dead." "Yes. But the precursor technology, Sarah, it can reverse cellular decay if it hasn't progressed too far. There's a chance." Hours later, as Keras's apocalyptic atmosphere began to stabilize under the influence of the reactivating precursor systems, Kyle Bennett opened his eyes in the ship's restoration chamber. His last memory had been of his suit failing as he tried to shield Sarah from a collapsing rock face. "Welcome back," Reed said, standing over him with Sarah. "You missed quite a bit." On the observation station, the Galactic Council had convened an emergency session. The viewing screens showed Keras transforming before their eyes. The toxins were being extracted from the atmosphere. The gravity was stabilizing. The violent geological activity had ceased. And throughout it all, 3 humans, who should have died a dozen times over, were directing the process. "The Renaissance Protocol," explained a hastily summoned precursor expert, "was a fail-safe, a way to ensure their technology could be reactivated after they disappeared." "By humans?" the Vrexian ambassador asked incredulously. "Why would the most advanced species in galactic history choose them as inheritors?" The expert's multiple appendages gestured nervously. "Not specifically humans. The protocol was designed to recognize certain neural and genetic patterns. Apparently, humans possess these patterns to a sufficient degree, but humans evolved on a completely different world." The Hegemony Supreme objected. "They have no connection to precursors." The expert hesitated. "That may not be entirely accurate. Preliminary analysis suggests human DNA contains certain sequences that match precursor genetic markers. The implications are significant." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. "Are you suggesting," the Drakthil representative finally asked, "that humans are descended from precursors?" "Not directly," the expert clarified, "but they appear to have been influenced by precursor genetic engineering. At some point in their evolutionary past, their species was modified." On the screens, Reed was now standing on what had formerly been Keras's toxic surface, breathing freely without his helmet. The ship's restoration field had permanently altered his physiology, allowing him to process the atmosphere that would have killed him hours earlier. Sarah and Kyle stood beside him, similarly transformed. Around them, more precursor structures were emerging from beneath the moon's surface, awakening after millennia of dormancy. "We should destroy them now," the Drakthul urged, "before they fully control the precursor network." "With what weapons?" countered the Vrexian. "Our systems cannot penetrate their defenses, and if we send in ships—" He gestured to the screen where several small precursor defense platforms had already emerged into orbit around Keras. "The humans are hailing us," a technician announced suddenly. The council chamber fell silent as Reed's face appeared on the main screen, calm and composed despite everything he had endured. "Greetings, Galactic Council," he said. "I believe we need to renegotiate humanity's status." 3 months later, Reed stood in the same grand chamber where he had once been mocked and dismissed. The chamber that had once seemed imposingly vast now felt ordinary. His enhanced physiology, a gift from the precursor technology, had eliminated the struggles with gravity and atmosphere that had once crippled him here. Beside him stood Sarah and Kyle, similarly transformed. Behind them stood a delegation from Earth, scientists and diplomats hastily assembled after the astonishing news had reached humanity's homeworld. The Galactic Council members no longer looked at them with contempt. Now their compound eyes, neural masses, and sensory appendages regarded the humans with a complex mixture of fear, respect, and desperate curiosity. The terms are simple, Reed stated. Humanity will share access to precursor technology gradually, in exchange for peaceful integration into the galactic community. We have no interest in dominance or retribution. The Hegemony Supreme's neural mass pulsed with what Reed had learned to recognize as skepticism. You control technology that could conquer half the galaxy, yet you seek only peaceful coexistence. After what was done to you, Reed thought of Marcus, of his sacrifice, of the casual cruelty that had nearly wiped them out. It would be so easy to demand more, to leverage their newfound power into galactic dominance. That's exactly why we're the ones who activated the precursor network, Reed replied. Because when pushed to our limits, we chose creation over destruction, adaptation over domination, life over death. Sarah stepped forward. The precursors didn't choose humans because we're stronger or more advanced than you. They chose us because we evolved on a world that allowed us to develop something you lack. Empathy alongside innovation, cooperation alongside competition. We don't want an empire, Kyle added. We want a partnership, but this time as equals. The negotiation continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Humanity, once dismissed as an evolutionary footnote, now held the keys to the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever known. As the formal agreement was being finalized, the Rexian ambassador approached Reed privately. There is something you should know, he said, mandibles clicking nervously. The precursor network extends far beyond Keras. There are nodes on thousands of worlds across the galaxy, perhaps beyond. Worlds we've colonized, worlds we've fought over for millennia, all of it potentially under human control. Reed nodded. We're aware. The ship's database is extensive. The Vrexian's compound eyes fixed on Reed. Then you understand why many species now fear you. The weak have become the strong in a single moment. No, Reed corrected him. We were never weak. You just failed to recognize a different kind of strength. 1 year later, Reed stood on the observation deck of the newly established precursor research station orbiting Earth. Below, the blue planet continued its serene rotation, unaware of how drastically its place in the galaxy had changed. Sarah joined him, carrying data tablets filled with the latest discoveries. The precursor database was yielding insights that were transforming every field of human science, from medicine to physics to astronomy. The Council is sending another delegation, she informed him. The Algon Confederation wants access to the regenerative technology. They're offering exclusive trading rights in the Orion sector. Reed nodded, unsurprised. Every week brought new supplicants, new offers, new alliances. Species that had once dismissed humanity now sought their favor, their expertise, their permission. There's something else, Sarah added, her expression troubled. The deep space arrays detected an energy signature at the edge of the galaxy. It matches precursor patterns, but different, older. Reed turned to face her. You think the precursors might still exist somewhere? I think, Sarah said carefully, that we've only scratched the surface of what's waiting out there, and whatever it is, it knows we've activated the network. It's coming. Reed gazed back at Earth, thinking of how far they'd come since that first disastrous meeting with the Galactic Council. Of Marcus's sacrifice. Of the countless lives that would depend on the decisions humanity made with its newfound power and knowledge. Then we'd better be ready, he said. In the vast control center beneath them, newly trained human operators worked alongside alien diplomats and scientists, all focused on unraveling the secrets of the precursor network that spanned the galaxy. Displays showed thousands of dormant nodes on countless worlds waiting to be awakened, waiting for humanity to decide what kind of galactic civilization they wanted to build. The weak gravity world that had spawned humanity had given them something unique, the capacity to imagine worlds beyond their own, to adapt rather than dominate. To transform weakness into strength, the galaxy would never be the same, and somewhere at its edge, something ancient was stirring, drawn by the reactivation of technology it had left behind eons ago, something that had shaped humanity's destiny long before they realized it, something that was now coming home.